Was sexually assaulted in Ghana by a police officer when reported the police didn't care. Why wording matters. In many countries they use such wording so that sexual assault is hard to prove and isn't a crime. Friday, March 24th, 2023. By TB Abwoj. I remember the day as if it were yesterday. His voice is so disgusting to my ears I can't seem to escape it. I will detail how I was sexually assaulted, so if you read further please understand there will be language used to describe the acts. No, I was not raped. There was no penetration. I had befriended someone that I truly trusted. He was much younger than I. He was only 25 years old. He was well spoken and very well educated. His father hustled hard to pay for his private school education. It was easier to talk to him than anyone else I had met in Ghana in some time. This young man's name is John Henuaku. I had been to his home, where he lives in a beautiful house with both his parents. His parents were considered well off within the community. His father worked very hard to make a living. John was trying to help me set up an account in the US via an online portal. He explained his cousin. He claimed this was his blood relative, had set up this account to get assistance for his business. I wanted to do the same. However, after hours the system was not working for us. He had a copy of my driver's license. I know mistake number one, we couldn't load anything on my MacBook. It wasn't working. We tried using his phone. Mine was not charged, big mistake. Either way it hadn't worked out after some time. John a few weeks later ended up using my ID. My credit card account was compromised. I was livid, so I decided to report this to the police. I was making a trip back to the US where I was going to also report this issue. I wanted to make sure it was also reported in Ghana, so I headed to my local police station. I was greeted with Emmanuel, whom I had sadly met prior to that day. He was brought into my life by an ex. Emmanuel had messaged me several times via WhatsApp after that meeting asking to meet up with me, to which I declined. No problem. I thought nothing of it, until I came to report John stealing my ID and using my credit card number. I thought surely this would simply be a report filed and I could leave. Note, in Ghana and several countries in Africa there is no such thing as rape from man to man or woman to man. There is no terminology or police code for rape. Men can't be legally raped in Ghana. Check the codes in countries you live in or immigrate to. Sexual assault isn't always illegal in every country, depending on what is physically done to you. Black to Africans would probably want to note this, especially the ones that hate the United States so much. Emmanuel was seated on the outside porch of this small police station. He wasn't dressed in a uniform. He wore a red and white floral top, with tan khaki pants. His black shoes were shined despite the unpaved parking lot. I can't stand his voice. It's deep but for some reason sounds like a croaking frog. He was not and isn't very professional. In his office I witnessed a Ghanaian man give him a bunch of balled up bills. He gave the man a copy of a police report. The man balled the police report up and stuffed it into his right pants pocket of his black dress pants. Backstory: prior meeting with Officer Emmanuel. Meeting him the first time, he was brought by my ex upon our breakup to where I was staying in order for the ex to talk to me. The ex thought he needed a mediator. He didn't. After our first conversation during our first meeting, police officer, pushed my ex on top of me while I was seated and said, "Give her a shot. Fuck her." I have a short video clip from that first meeting. He can be clearly seen and heard telling me to turn off the camera. It is time and date stamped. I was assigned a police officer to help with the report as Emmanuel was the head of that station. He ordered someone below him to take my report. What Emmanuel didn't let me do was leave his office, his huge private office. He made an officer only known to me as David speak with me in his office. They both didn't wear uniforms. Saturday, August 7th, 2021. I was told it was because of the weekend. This is how I was unable to obtain their surnames. I asked too, but they refused to give them. Officer David asked questions, filled out a form on his end, then gave me a sheet of paper to write out my complaint. David left the office, where Emmanuel commented on my breast. I ignored him several times, as I asked about the form I was filling out. David knocked before entering the office of his superior. Emmanuel answered, letting him come inside. After reading what I had written, David said, "It's too detailed, just write a short form." I was handed another piece of paper. When he left, Emmanuel said, "I have a big dick. You want to chop my dick? It's big, you'll love it." Me? No. Thank you, I'm married. My husband's is just fine and it's big too. Emmanuel, I will fuck you better than he can. I love your huge breasts. I love them. You want to see my big dick? He had his hand holding his penis. I made the mistake of looking. I'm human. His penis ran all the way down to his knee. I was disgusted that I even looked, and again I said, "No," but this time louder, and even added it in Twi Dabi Dabi Dabi, to which he found laughable. I guess because he repeated my words in Twi, then laughed. I was amazingly calm, but my heart was pounding. I have a very bad temper. I wanted to hit him right where his big dick was. This man was neither attractive or subtle. His cocky, Disgusting behavior made me fearful. I had always thought I was not afraid of anything, but jail in a country like Ghana would be worse than death to me. All I could think is that he's probably raped a woman before in his lifetime. Probably right inside the office in which I was sitting. I was meeting with an American that lived in Ghana and also lived in New York City. We were having lunch, but it was getting late. I text him, Malik, telling him, OMG, this officer, I met him before and he's offering to show me his dick. I want out of here. Malik was far from me. He had already moved towards the mall where we were meeting for lunch. Traffic is very bad during the day in Accra. He asked me did I want him to come. Number 2 mistake I made, I should have asked him to come. Emmanuel left the office several times to check on other officers, or because he was called to do something. When he returned, I was writing. He reached down, pinched my right breast. It hurt as he squeezed my nipple. Side note, in January 2022, I lost my right nipple from breast cancer. I hit his hand and said, don't touch me. He laughed. Again, they're so beautiful. I love them. I would chop them. I finished writing. David returned, I gave him the report. Someone also came in with him, bringing Emmanuel's lunch. I remember it was my favorite tilapia and banku. I asked if I could leave again, but David said he wanted to write the report with what I had written added. David left me alone again. Emmanuel offered his lunch. I told him no because I was meeting someone for lunch. He stood, walked to me. He took a piece of tilapia, reaching out to me with it. I said no, thank you, but he kept pushing it. I took my right hand to reach for the fish. He shoved it into my mouth. He then stuck his finger in my mouth deeply. I quickly pulled my head back, as he shoved it in and out of my mouth. By that time I used my hands to push his body away from me. He laughed. I wasn't smiling. Again I said, leave me alone. He offered me more of his fish. When he tried to place more in my mouth, I was physically able to not allow him to get to my face. He sits his fish down and sits on my lap, where I again pushed him off. This entire situation took place over 2 hours. It wasn't all a series of direct events. When he left the room, I had 3 cell phones. I turned one on to record him talking to me. I was so scared the phone would make a noise to let him know I was recording. Why was I scared? I'm so angry with myself that I was so afraid of him. Why was I afraid? I sat there for what ended up being 3.5 hours. To this day I couldn't tell the full story. I feel so stupid. Why didn't I just hit him and leave? I feel guilty. I feel like I didn't do enough to protect myself. He's the head of this entire police station. I thought to myself, East Legon, Jesus, I live in this district. What do I do? The report even asked for my address. I lied. I lied on the report. Oh my God, will that make the report invalid? What are the rules in Ghana? Who can I report this to? He's in charge here. Surely no one will believe me. He comes back into his office. He's tall and thin, standing above me looking at my breasts. I fold my arms to cover them. He tells me, move your arms. Here is the 4+ minute audio of him talking to me. I'm repeating him because the phone is deeply hidden. I wanted to make sure he can be heard. I didn't think he could be heard. I covered it so well in my bag. I was afraid what he'd do if he found out I was recording him. In the recording, he's returning to his office after I started recording. I waited for him to return. He can be heard saying, I'll fuck you so hard you'll cry. I'm sorry, but this coming from a stranger and police officer doesn't turn me on in the least bit. As a matter of fact, it was terrifying. Test my dick, you know, check. What? Test my dick, you know, choke if I can. If I do what? Test my dick, you know, check it if I can. I'm telling you. Chop. I'm telling you. I will fuck you up and you cry. I'm good. I don't need to be fucked. My husband does a good job. No, I'm good. Do women fall for that? Is that what? Oh, I have good dick. Do women fall for you saying that? I'm coming. Jesus Christ, this is like a rape fucking sanctuary. Accident? No. No.
It's almost 3. I'm meeting someone.
Okay. When you get any information, you call.
Do I get any police report number or anything today?
Is it
Do I get a police report number?
the policeman's number?
No, like a police report number, a DC number or anything.
Oh, no.
So what happens now?
You will try to locate the gentleman and arrest him and bring him there. Then you call him to come. That is our work.
Okay.
Because if you don't get the man, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
So you have to get him, and you will definitely get him. So leave it, okay? Put your hands down.
Why? Put my hands down for what? So that means I'll have to come back again.
Yeah, he will call you.
You have my information right on there.
Are you saying you have my number?
Yes, I swear I have it.
Let me see.
Because when this happened to me, that was the first thing I was going to do is call your number. So
Let me see your number. My number.
I swear I have it. I'll text you when I get out. I'm not lying.
Okay, let me give it to you.
No, I don't need it. I don't need it.
Terrifying. He's sitting on me at this time. If you can hear, I'm trying to get him off of me. He's sitting on my lap. He's touching me. I'm trapped under his weight. This is where you can hear me pushing him off of me. He's kissing me on the face. I'm seated where he told me, so I was in a position where I was unable to move. After sticking his finger in and out of my mouth, grabbing my breasts, squeezing my breasts, he's on top of me and heavy for a thin man. People asked why I didn't bite him. My front teeth are a partial denture plate, by the way. The bite wasn't hard at all. He asked me to show him that I still had his number. I didn't. I blocked him on WhatsApp. You can hear me fumbling because he's asking me to show him I still have his phone number. He says, "Flash me." This means call him. To show him I have his number so he can have my real number. I was afraid he'd see that with my other phone I was recording him. He could also be heard saying, "Move your hands." My arms were crossed in order to keep him from grabbing my breasts again. A month later, Emmanuel and David had done nothing on my case against John. Whenever I text him about the case, he said, "Come back to my office so we can talk about it." I refused because I couldn't locate anyone to go with me. I later reported him and 4 other Ghanaians to the police SID headquarters in Accra. Note, I went to IGP's office, that is the head of the entire Ghana police force. I reported to his second in command. He pushed me to head of SID. Then from there I was given a poorly trained, rude officer named Charles. Charles was afraid of his own shadow. He didn't almost no work on my case. They ignored my case. They didn't do anything except to one person. That was minimal. Ghana is very lawless. It's not the sort of country where much crime gets solved unless it makes national news. Yes, Ghanaians fear jail. This is why many don't protest the corruption and other issues facing them, like blacks in America. They are fearful of the punishment, but I witnessed a lot of crimes, not much justice. It's by God's grace the place isn't more violent. Like in Nigeria, there was violence during the election. Well, in Ghana, their 2020 election, which I was living there to witness, people were murdered. President Akufo-Addo hasn't ever pushed for their murders to be solved. The UK nor US government has ever spoken about the Ghana 2020 election violence or these murders. This shows you how hypocrisy works around the world. Not a word about Ghana's election violence. When I reported this to my Ghanaian husband, long story, he laughed hysterically about what the police officer did to me. He laughed so much I wanted to become violent. I simply said, "Pretend this was your 8-year-old daughter, then laugh as hard as you are now." He just looked at me and stopped laughing. His laughter came even as he heard the man's voice talking to me that way. Thank you for reading. Please consider buying a coffee for Lacey's House efforts in gender equality and children's rights as a